Welcome to Life Confessions TV. Try to relax and feel the story.
My name is Natalie Carter, and 3 years ago, I learned a lesson that changed the way I see love, loyalty, and money forever. For almost 5 years, I believed I was building a future with a man named Evan Whitmore. When we met, Evan was charming in that effortless way that makes you feel like the most important person in the room. He was confident, funny, and full of plans for the future. He worked in marketing and constantly talked about how one day he would become an executive at a big company. Back then, I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago. My life was structured, predictable, and honestly a little boring. Evan changed that. He brought excitement into my life. Spontaneous weekend trips, late-night dinners, long conversations about our dreams. After a year together, we moved into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but we made it ours. At least, that's what I thought. For the next 4 years, we built what looked like the perfect relationship. But the truth is, if you looked closely, the cracks were already there. Evan always talked about money, not in a responsible way, more like an obsession. He constantly compared himself to people who were richer than him. "Did you see Jake's new car?" he'd say. "Can you believe Melissa just bought a condo? Some people just get lucky." I would always laugh it off. "Evan, we're doing fine," I'd say. "Not everything is about money." He'd smile, but something about his expression always felt slightly off. Still, I loved him. Or at least I believed I did. 2 years into the relationship, Evan started talking about marriage. He would casually mention rings, houses, kids. I started imagining it too, a future together. But around the 4th year, something slowly began to change. He became distant. At first it was subtle. He worked later hours, spent more time on his phone, took more business dinners. Whenever I asked about it, he had an explanation ready. "Just trying to move up in the company," he'd say. And because I trusted him, I believed every word. Until one night that changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I had stayed late at the office finishing a quarterly report. When I got home, Evan was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. His laptop sat open on the coffee table. Normally, I never touched his things. But that night, something inside me told me to look. I wish I could say I ignored that feeling, but I didn't. And that decision changed my life. When I opened the laptop, the screen lit up to a messaging app. At first, I thought it was work. Then I saw the name, Lauren Hensley, and the message at the bottom of the screen. "I can't wait until you leave her. Once you get the job, everything will be perfect." My stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought I was misunderstanding something. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was reading it wrong. But then I scrolled up, and what I saw made my hands start shaking. Message after message. Weeks of conversations. Photos. Plans. Lauren wasn't just someone he was flirting with. She was the daughter of a wealthy real estate developer. Her father owned several commercial properties in the city, and Evan had clearly figured that out. One message burned into my memory. "Once I get hired at your dad's company, I'm finally going to be set $180,000 salary right away. Then I'll break things off with Natalie." I remember reading that line over and over again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe it. 4 years together. And to him, I was just a temporary inconvenience. A placeholder. Something to keep until a better opportunity appeared. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands were trembling. Across the room, Evan was still lying in bed, peacefully asleep, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just destroyed everything we had built together. For a moment, I felt something dangerous rising inside me. Anger, betrayal, humiliation. But strangely, I didn't cry. Instead, something much colder settled in my chest. A realization. If Evan wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction, then I would too. Because there was one thing he didn't know about me. Something I had never mentioned during our relationship. 2 years earlier, my Aunt Margaret Hale had passed away. Most people in my life believed she had left me a small inheritance. That's what I told them. What they didn't know was the truth. Margaret hadn't left me a little money. She left me control of her investment company. And that company owned a surprising number of assets, including a small but rapidly growing marketing firm, a company called Brightstone Media, a company that had recently started expanding and was planning to hire several new executives, including a director of marketing position. Salary, $180,000 per year. Exactly the job Evan had been bragging about in those messages. I sat there in the dark living room for a long time that night, thinking, processing, planning. Evan thought he had found a shortcut to wealth, a rich girlfriend, a powerful father-in-law, a dream job. What he didn't know was that the company he was trying so hard to impress was already mine. And for the first time since reading those messages, I finally smiled, because Evan Whitmore had just made the biggest mistake of his life. And he had absolutely no idea. Over the next few weeks, I did something that surprised even myself. I acted completely normal. Every morning I made coffee. Every evening I asked Evan about his day. I laughed at his jokes. I listened to his stories. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was preparing. The first thing I did was contact Oliver Grant, the CEO of Brightstone Media. Oliver had worked with my aunt for over a decade and had been running the company's daily operations. He was one of the few people who knew I had inherited the business. When I called him, he sounded surprised. "Natalie, everything all right?" "Yes," I said calmly. "But I want to talk about the director of marketing position." There was a short pause. "The one we're planning to fill next month?" "That's the one." I leaned back in my chair. "And I already know who the final candidate will be." Oliver chuckled. "You've done your research." "Oh," I said quietly. "You could say that." A week later, Evan came home with a huge smile on his face. "You won't believe this," he said. "I just got invited to a final interview with Brightstone Media." I pretended to look impressed. "That's amazing." He nodded excitedly. "The starting salary is $180,000. I could almost hear the pride in his voice. "What are the chances?" I said. "Sounds like the perfect opportunity." Evan had no idea how true that statement actually was. 2 weeks later, he got the call. He got the job. That night, he opened a bottle of expensive champagne. "I told you everything was going to work out," he said. I raised my glass. "To your future," I replied. But inside, I was thinking something very different, because the real story was just beginning. Evan started working at Brightstone Media the following Monday. For the first month, everything seemed perfect for him. He came home every evening talking about how impressive the company was. "The CEO is great," he said one night. "Really smart guy. Oliver Grant." I smiled slightly. "Yes, I've heard good things about him." Evan had no idea that Oliver and I spoke almost every day. And every report Oliver sent me about Evan confirmed exactly what I expected. Evan wasn't just ambitious. He was arrogant. Within weeks, he was already talking about how he planned to move up in the company, how he would eventually become a partner, how Brightstone Media would be the foundation of his future wealth. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Evan began spending more and more time with Lauren Hensley. Sometimes he claimed it was work networking. Other times, he didn't even bother explaining. But I already knew, because Oliver had quietly confirmed something else. Lauren's father had recently been trying to establish a partnership with Brightstone Media, and Evan believed dating Lauren would guarantee his position inside the company. He truly thought he was playing the smartest game in the room. What he didn't know was that the board meeting scheduled for the following month would change everything, because that meeting was when I planned to finally show up. The day of the meeting arrived on a Thursday morning. Brightstone Media's headquarters sat on the 18th floor of a glass office tower downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early. Oliver met me in the lobby. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "It's time." We stepped into the elevator together. When the doors opened, the conference room was already filled with executives, including Evan. The moment he saw me walk in, his entire expression changed. Confusion, then panic. "Natalie," he said, standing up. "What are you doing here?" I walked calmly to the head of a table. Oliver cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "there's someone you should all formally meet." He gestured toward me. "This is Natalie Carter, the owner of Brightstone Media." The room went silent. Evan's face went completely pale. "What?" he said. I looked directly at him. "Yes, Evan. My aunt founded this company, and 2 years ago, she left it to me." He stared at me like he had just stepped into a nightmare. "But you never told me." I shrugged slightly. "You never asked." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then I opened the folder in front of me. "Now," I said calmly, "let's discuss something else." I slid a document across the table, straight toward Evan. "Your employment contract." He looked down at it slowly, confused. Then his eyes widened, because he had finally reached the final page. The termination clause, signed by me. "I'm afraid," I said quietly. "Your position here has been terminated, effective immediately." Evan looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. "You're firing me?" I leaned back slightly. "You see, Evan, I've recently learned that you've been using your position here to manipulate potential partnerships for personal gain." His mouth opened, but no words came out. "And more importantly," I continued, "I don't hire people who see relationships as business opportunities." The silence in the room felt heavy. Evan slowly stood up. His entire future had just collapsed in front of him. The $180,000 salary, the promotion, the connection to Lauren's wealthy family, all gone. And for the first time since that night on the couch, I finally felt something close to peace. Because Evan Whitmore didn't just lose a job that day. He lost the biggest opportunity of his life. And the worst part for him? The entire time he thought he was using me to climb higher. He had been working for me all along. A week later, Evan moved out of the apartment. Lauren stopped answering his calls soon after. Apparently, dating a future executive was exciting. Dating an unemployed man, not so much. As for me, Brightstone Media continued to grow. 6 months later, the company signed its biggest contract yet. And sometimes, when I think back to that night I opened Evan's laptop, I realized something important. That betrayal didn't destroy my life. It revealed the truth. And sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's simply letting someone watch the life they tried to steal from you become something they'll never be part of again. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. And I'd love to know what you think. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, money, and unexpected revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the most shocking stories are the ones that are completely real.